Welcome everybody to another edition of Lifeworks Live. We are Don and Lisa Hogue with Lifeworks International, and this is the show where you can call in with the tough questions, and you'll get the real answers. So if you want to call in, the number is 403-632-4087, and we got the number up on the screen there for you as well. And so what's on the show today? Well, last week we talked a little bit about triggers, and while we were talking about triggers, ego came up a little bit as we were trying to explain it. So we thought we'd go into more detail this week on talking about the ego and the ego mind. So first thing we're going to talk about ego. What is it? Are we born with it? And also, where does it come from? Also today we're going to dig into our conscious toolbox. Pulling out a tool for you to use in your everyday life. And we'll do another version of the weekly challenge. And we'll talk about one of our own challenges and how we work through it. And Lisa, what else have we got today?
We have the conscious question of the day, and it's a good one. And then anything that comes up from our Facebook page or our website, we answer any questions that people send to us there if we have time. So we're going to jump right in and say, what is the ego? Well, the ego basically is the negative self-talk. I call it the itty-bitty shitty committee in my head. So the heart and the higher mind, which we're connected to our inner self, that's where the ego is not. Or in our hearts. The ego is in our thoughts and in our head. And where does it really get created? Well, the ego gets created after we're born, when any of our basic needs are not being met as a child, as an infant. So when our needs are not being met when we're a baby, we instantly choose fear thoughts, such as, no one's here to take care of me. This place is not safe. I'm all alone. There's no support for me, so I mustn't be lovable. I mustn't be enough. I'm not worthy. I must be doing something wrong. I deserve this. Life is hard, and you can't trust anyone. Those are just a few. They're just a few. Lots can get created in our mind there. So other things that come up are, not as a baby, but as we get older, we start to believe that, that life is all about fear, and it's hard, and there's separation. We're self-centered. There's judgment there. You get critical. So we've got a call coming in, but I don't know if it's one for today.
Oh, funny.
So anyways, the ego is developed, and if we start to believe it, then that negative self-talk gets stored in our unconscious mind. So, and then it becomes the filter that we see life through. It's like the glasses that we see everything through. So Don's going to take it away and say what is not the ego.
Well, yeah, let's also talk about what's not the ego so we don't mix up terms, because sometimes when you hear the word ego, you're thinking about somebody that's maybe just being egotistical, or somebody that's egocentric, and that's on a whole spectrum, all the way from just being self-centered to being an egomaniac. And so you might describe somebody that way, but really that's what that is more of just a personality trait, or like a coping mechanism for somebody to be self-centered or egotistical. So we're not really talking about that personality type thing. We're talking about the deep-seated unconscious way that of the ego that's going on in your mind. So again, that egotistical person, that's more the way you would view somebody. But really recognize that personalities and coping mechanisms are born out of your ego mind. So there's lots of different personalities, and being egotistical or egocentric is really just one personality. There's other personalities. There's the personalities like the blamer, the shy person, or there's the pleaser, and there's lots of different personalities, dissociated one. So all these different personalities are born out of the ego mind as coping mechanisms and a way to get through life. But so the ego mind itself if we go deeper, is really the beliefs and strategies that we've learned and chosen growing up. And the reason, and I want to say that again, it's not just the stuff we've learned, and that's from our family and from society and as we're growing up and things around us, but it's also what we chose, because there's lots of things that we saw or learned or exposed to, and we made choices. We say, am I going to choose this, or is it going to say, no, I'm watching somebody be this way, I don't want to be that way, I'm going to make a different choice and be this way. But it's still basically, you're choosing one side or the other, and they're both ego-driven, because you're trying to get your needs met, or you're trying to deal with a certain situation, and trying to manage a situation that's maybe not an ideal situation. That makes sense.
And
so, go ahead.
No, I'm going to add too, I talked about what the ego is when our needs weren't being met as a child. If you come from a home where the parents are connected and loving and it's a safe environment, then those beliefs don't limit you. Those aren't the limiting beliefs. They're healthy beliefs, like there's love and support and I'm accepted. There's peace in my family and unity, and we're a team and we work as a family unit. So then that self-talk tends to be a lot more positive, and it isn't holding you back, and it's not always putting you down. It doesn't become an ego attack. It's just, your ego doesn't have to always be attacking you, but in some cases it does. Exactly. So in the last show, right, we talked about triggers. And so a trigger is just a memory or a flashback that takes us back to an experience that we had earlier in our life or as a child. And when we're triggered, it's our ego that steps in and repeats all that negative self-talk that I mentioned earlier right out of our unconscious mind. So all those limiting beliefs start flowing back into your thoughts about anything that might happen. But like I said, if we were raised in a family where there was love and connection and it was a very safe home, then there wouldn't be the negative talk from your ego, and it wouldn't be developed. And let me add, so the thoughts that are going to be going through your mind as you filter every situation is going to say, I'm lovable, and this is safe, I have value, I'm important, I'm enough. And so if you did have met needs as a child, you have a really positive outlook on life, and you're trusting and accepting, and you understand people, and you're compassionate and heart-centered, because that's what you learned. So I'm going to give an example of, where there might be like an ego attack. So say you've got a date planned with a friend or a partner or someone, and they cancel last minute. I mean, who has ever had that? We've all had those opportunities where that happens. So, if you have a strong limiting belief from your ego's going to step in and start to attack you instantly. You feel offended, and you take it really personally, and all the negative messages start bubbling up from your unconscious mind, such as, I'm all alone, there's no one here to support me, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I must have done something wrong, I deserve this, I can't trust anybody. And so all those limiting beliefs come from the ego. They just start attacking you. And you're either going to choose to believe it or not. But if you were lucky enough to be raised in that loving, connected family that I mentioned earlier, you won't be offended by it. You actually will respond absolutely differently. You'll respond like, well, I hope that person's okay. Something must have come up, and I'll have to make other plans. So there's no ego attack because you don't have the limiting beliefs that run your life. So it's completely different once you recognize when you are having an ego attack, and you can switch your thoughts away from the limiting, negative, unconscious beliefs. You can switch into a healthy response. And you're not reacting, you're responding. And that's what we're shooting for. That's what we teach all the time, is to move from reacting to responding.
Okay, that moves us right into the conscious question of the day. That's a tongue twister tonight. So the question is, what do you do when you have an ego attack? And to one step further, can you override the ego? That's a good question. Can you actually override your ego? Well, first of all, you have to be willing to become aware of what is happening. So it's starting off with that awareness. And just like last week when we talked about triggers, it's being aware that you're being triggered. That really is the first step. And same thing with an ego attack. How your ego is responding, or can you become aware of it? So the way to recognize whether you're dealing with the ego or not is the ego response is going to have some version of fear or attack, is where that's going to be based. So if you kind of pull it back and think, is this coming out of a place of fear? Is my ego telling me to do some form of attack? So the fear could be examples of that. It's just the place where you think, I'm not safe. Or it could be something that's just unknown, and so you have fear about it. So the ego's saying, oh, don't do that. You don't know what's on the other side of that fence, so don't go there. Or even past failures are going to fear. As far as attack goes, very most common is blame. And that's the ego saying, oh, blame somebody else. Also, or passive-aggressive, of course, another way. We could do a whole show on passive-aggressive, because there's very many versions of that. Or guilt, your own guilt, or trying to project guilt on somebody else, making them feel guilty. That's an attack. However, if the opposite of that, so that would be the ego response. Now, if you want to look at a heart-centered response, it's going to come and it's going to be based out of love. It's going to be based out of compassion, and it's going to be based out of safety. And it's going to instill responses like, what can I do? Or how can I help? Another response would be, what can I learn from this situation and what's going on, or what I'm experiencing here, or what's best for this situation, what's best for me and the other person or everybody else involved in this situation. And that's going to be the most heart-centered. So that's kind of like the broad spectrum, and whatever's your ego is telling you. Are we good? Oh, yeah, we got cut again?
We got cut out. I can't share this. I don't know where to share it either.
You call that number back and say, were you a caller?
Yeah, I don't know.
How long ago did we get cut out?